All right, here we go. The war summary for live stream 119, April 25th to, what the hell am I saying? May 25th to May 31st, 1917. Here we go. It's been a while. I'm still a little sick and congested, but we'll see how this goes. The British transport Transylvania with troops aboard was torpedoed on May 4th in the Mediterranean. Of those on board, 29 officers and 373 of other ranks perished when the transport went down. The captain of the vessel, one officer, and 9 of the crew also were drowned or killed. The anchor liner was attacked off the Italian coast. Some survivors were put ashore at an Italian port. The Transylvania was a vessel of over 14,000 tons and was built in 1914. And I went and looked it up a little later because I think I used it for the image of the day. And it was escorted by 2 Japanese destroyers, which obviously didn't do a very good job. A big Italian victory over the Austrians is reported officially from Rome. On the Carso, after 10 hours of heavy artillery preparation, the Third Army smashed its way through the enemy's lines from Castagnavizza to the sea, capturing over 9,000 prisoners. And this is the 10th Battle of the Isonzo, I do believe. The Austrians were surprised by the suddenness of the onslaught, but recovered sufficiently to launch counterattacks, which were beaten off by the Italian guns. The important town of Giamiano and the heights east of Pietrorossa and Bagne were taken. Italian aircraft dropped 10 tons of explosives on the enemy during the fight. 10 British batteries supported the Italians. On the side note, I did butcher those words a bit. I was also thinking about something else, which was, I thought this was like the beginnings of maybe the Austrians are going to start counterattacking with Caporetto, but that doesn't happen until the fall. Holy Moses. Anyways, so we still got, and that's the 12th battle, so we still got another in between one as well. The Carso defenses are hewn out of solid rock, making the defense organization of the Austrians almost impregnable. Pneumatic drills and dynamite and tunneling tools have been employed by the Austrians to drill and blast and fashion underground fortresses and machine gun redoubts. Iron plates an inch thick, cemented into the limestone rock, protect observation posts and snipers. A big army of laborers had been employed by the Austrians to work on these strong defenses, but before the British heavy guns and new explosives, these strong positions have been blasted out of existence, quite literally. I just was reading a little bit about this battle in the Caporetto book, and the author said that the Austrians were literally blown off the mountain. I'm like, holy. Anyways, Japan is aiding the Allies in the fight against the submarine, kind of. A considerable number of light craft have reached the Mediterranean and are cooperating with the Allied navies. Except you can ask the Transylvania about that one. The French liner Santé has been sunk with a loss of 44 lives. There were 344 persons, presumably French troops, on board when the steamer was attacked on the voyage from Salonika to Marseille. The captain went down with his vessel, which was a boat of over 7,000 tons. That'd be an easy little trivia, math thing that they always have to get you to do. Anyways, about, like 344 minus 44, how many survived? Anyways, German airships raided the eastern counties of England on Wednesday night and killed 1 man in a Norfolk village. 4 or 5 airships took part in the raid, which blew me away. But owing to rain and fog, they were unable to locate their objectives and did little material damage. For the same reason, the British aircraft that pursued them were unable to prevent their escape. I guess when we heard about that report a little while ago, they were saying there's going to be no more Zeppelin constructions, but I guess obviously they're still going to use whatever they have left. The Russian Constituent Assembly will be summoned at an early date. The coalition government is taking steps to make arrangements for the election of delegates in which the soldiers at the front will participate. The defunct provisional government came into conflict with the proletariat by its refusal to call the assembly until after the war. The assembly will decide as to the future constitution of Russia and will also discuss plans for the division of the land. On the Russian front, the enemy is beginning to show signs of activity. Gas was directed against the Russian lines north of Galitz, which a change in the wind turned toward the German lines. That's the flipping problem with gas, isn't it? German naval activity is pronounced in the Baltic. A violent bombardment was heard during Tuesday night. On the French front, the fighting yesterday was confined to artillery duels in the Lyon region around Vanclerc, Californie Plateau, and at Chevreux. Major General Maurice, the British War Office expert, in his review of the operations of the past week, gives high praise to the French, who he states have made strategical gains greater than are indicated on the map. Aerial activity on the British Western Front is increasing, a sign of the approach of another offensive. 11 German machines were brought down. 3 British machines are missing. The German midnight statement says there is increasing artillery activity along the British front south of the Cambrai-Bapaume road and at Saint-Quentin. General Maurice, referring to the lull in the British offensive, which has followed a period of heavy fighting, refers to the German official reports as indicating a loss of morale in the enemy ranks. Ordinary artillery bombardments are reported as British offensives when no offensive, save artillery bombardment, takes place. I can see maybe why they got General Maurice to do this. He's like the master of freaking BS, it seems like, anyways, to me. Oh my God. British losses in the Battle of Arras are, as compared with the losses on the Somme, are 50% smaller, according to General Maurice. Although larger forces are engaged, 4 times more ground has been taken than in the whole Somme fight, and many times more prisoners and guns. I'm sorry, I'm just having a blast already, and it's only page 2. Brazil is practically at war with Germany. Teuton dreams of a Germanized Latin America are dissipated by the bold front shown by the Latin republics to Germany's ruthless campaign at the sea. The sinking of the Brazilian steamers Tijuca and Parana created a state of war from which Brazil shows no disposition to recede. In any steps that may be taken, Brazil will cooperate with the United States. Congress has yet to determine whether the country is at war and what steps shall be taken. On the British Western Front, oh my God, wait until we get into the, well, you're going to see some more stuff in a bit. Or maybe that was the earlier days, I think it is. On the British Western Front, military operations are confined at present to artillery and aircraft. The guns were particularly active in the vicinity of Luce and on the left bank of the Scarpe. Aerial engagements were more lively, 12 enemy machines being brought down. 6 British pilots failed to return. The Stars and Stripes now flies at the front. The nucleus of Uncle Sam's first contingent of 40,000 men is on the French front, most of the men being undergraduates of American universities. It consists of a convoy of American motor transport service of 5-ton wagons. Other sections are in training behind the French lines. I do believe the bloody women there, the Hello Girls, for Christ's sakes, I think they're already there. The submarine menace is well in hand, according to Mr. Lloyd George. Germany says is doomed to disappointment as Britain is in no danger of starvation and the war cannot be won by Germany's submarines. Wait till you see another paragraph next page. And I'm like, oh, really? No food problems, huh? Germany says is doomed to disappointment as Britain is in no danger of starvation and the war cannot be won by Germany's submarines. Satisfactory progress is being made in sinking the enemy's craft, and in consequence, the food situation has been improved. The British Premier paid a high tribute to the American Navy for the support it had given in tackling the submarine problem. Even though the Americans, I think, never do actually sink a single submarine, their presence actually did work because the U-boats were like, well, let's not go here. Or, you know what I mean? It's just the fear of. On the Julian front, on the Carso Plateau, the Italians continue to make headway. The battle is raging from the Flava to the sea, fighting their way foot by foot. The Italians drove the enemy from his powerful and strongly defended underground fortifications. Hold on, I'm going to take a little sip of coffee. Coffee has been done. In 2 days, over 10,000 prisoners were taken, including 316 officers, and a considerable amount of war material was left in the hands of the Italians. The enemy was driven to a line south of the Gimignano town, the Italian brigades in this sector achieving a brilliant victory. North of Gimignano, heavy fighting took place, the enemy being driven from the strongly fortified heights. Here, the Italians extended their line to the outskirts of Versio. Desperate counterattacks on the southern Carso were repulsed. In other sectors, the fighting was violent, but the Italians inflicted heavy losses on the enemy all along the line. Speculation in foodstuffs. interesting, is prohibited in the British Isles. The elimination of unessential middlemen is aimed at. The further regulations of food and food prices will largely depend upon the action taken in the United States. Destructive fires in Germany are reported in Berlin newspapers. A big fire broke out in the Moabit freight station in Berlin, resulting in the destruction of army supplies and buildings. Other fires broke out in provincial towns, which are attributed to incendiarism. Germany has increased the war tax from occupied territory in Belgium. Brussels will be forced to contribute an additional 10 million marks monthly. In the Lyon region, north of the Chemin des Dames, the Germans forced an entrance into the French frontline trenches. Later, the enemy was driven out. Elsewhere, the operations were chiefly artillery. The Chevreau Wood was stormed by the French on Thursday. The enemy offered a stubborn resistance, but was driven from a portion of his fortified positions in the wood. Of Lyon, $75 million alone. Oh my God, I'm thinking of the over there, but it's the wrong way because it's whatever, you get it. A loan of $75 million has been made to Great Britain by the United States, increasing Britain's loan indebtedness to $400 million and will not be paid off by the Americans, I do believe, until 1986. Holy shoot. South of the Arras-Cambrai Road, the British troops improved their position at Fontaine-la-Croisille. Some prisoners were taken in patrol engagements near the Cojoy River. 11 enemy air machines were brought down during the day. 4 British pilots are missing. Cojoy, doesn't matter. A German attack on the Chemin des Dames near Moulin de la Faux was beaten off by the French on Saturday night. From La Faux de Crayon, the guns on both sides kept up a heavy bombardment all through the night. Possession of the height of land gives the French gunners a great advantage over the Germans. Little by little, the French are advancing and strengthening their positions. In the Champagne region, the Germans made 3 serious efforts to break through the French lines in the Tiffin sector. They succeeded in penetrating at one point, but later were driven out. The infantry assaults were preceded by violent bombardments. Heavy artillery engagements took place along the Champagne front. The sinking of a Spanish steamer and the loss of 133 lives is reported from London. The Izanguir sank in 5 minutes. The cause of the disaster is not stated. Another Spanish vessel sunk is the Bagona, a ship of nearly 3,000 tons. The tying up of Spanish trade, owing to the German submarine menace, has created a serious situation in Spain where there's a strong demand for war against Germany. But remember, they did find those little secret spots, I think, off the coast of Spain there. Remember, they were like pretending to be boys or something, and they could actually like refuel or something. Remember, fact checker with me for crying out loud. Combined Allied air squadrons, including British, French, and Belgian, bombarded. I think we're going to see one that says Serbian later. I'm pretty darn sure. German defenses on the Belgian coast, causing many explosions. The places attacked were Heitst, Blankenberge, and Zeebrugge. Obviously not here, but I'm pretty darn sure they mentioned Serbian pilots. I was like, what? In the Gulf of Trieste, British monitors with big guns are pounding the Austrian roads and defenses, cooperating with the Italian offensive on the Carso. Aeroplane hangars, military positions, railway stations on the main road, and the railway to Trieste are under fire from these heavy guns, which are doing considerable damage. A Trieste train was caught squarely by a salvo and disappeared in a cloud of smoke and splinters. Standing off Prosecco and Contovale, the monitors fired for 2 hours, smashing everything in sight. Austrian hydroplanes and Italian aircraft fought over the monitors. 2 enemy machines were shot down. That's a pretty cool image in my head. The Italian drive towards Trieste is making considerable headway. On the Carso Plateau, the Austrian second line of defense along sections of the heights was stormed and carried. Do you know who's in charge of the Austrians there? Berejevich. All the captured ground on the Isonzo has been held against Austrian counterattacks. On Saturday, Cadorna's troops smashed their way through the Austrian fortified positions between Gimignano and the Gulf of Trieste, pushing past the Montfalcone Duino Railway. northeast of San Clovani, right up to the outskirts of Medica village. At the head of the Paliova Valley, Italian troops carried the heights north of Plava and joined their Monte Chucho lines with those on Hill 363. I think 363 is that horrible hill they keep talking about. It's like a nightmare to get. But they did take it. The Austrians take it back, I do believe. 11 guns and 1,200 Austrians were taken. In 2 days fighting, the Italians took 4,700 prisoners. A German aerial raid on the southeast coast of England on Friday afternoon resulted in the death of 76 persons. Yeah, this is a biggie. The wounded numbered 174. High up in the air, 16 German airplanes dropped explosives on the crowded streets of an unnamed town at an hour when many people were abroad. And you know what they do, eh? Lots of times people come out to take a look. Jesus H. Curiosity drew a number of the inhabitants from their homes to watch the enemy aircraft. 3 of the raiders were shot down on their way home. A number of the victims of the German aerial attack on an open, of course, defenseless town were women and children, of course, in keeping with the brutal methods of warfare, and they all had limps. In the brutal methods of warfare of the enemy is the official announcement from Berlin that British hospital ships, other than those from Salonika, will be treated as warships and sunk at sight. It is falsely alleged by Germany that Britain puts her hospital ships to military purposes. And it's true. Remember, we found this out a long time ago. Germany had multiple they were allowed multiple occasions to inspect the hospital ships. They never did. So it's like you can't go around saying, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, like I'm here. It's one for the British. As you know, I'm pretty anti whatever. An Austrian counteroffensive on a large scale is threatened against Italy and the Trentino. Austria has withdrawn forces from the Russian and Balkan fronts for a desperate drive on Italy. Last year, a similar offensive was attempted with some measure of temporary success to break through the Posino Heights and reach Schlio, and on their right to turn the Italian flank on the Brentna. Brusilov's big offensive in Volhynia forced Austria to withdraw reinforcements from the Trentino, and Cadorna began a counterattack which forced the Austrians to abandon their offensive and to withdraw. Duino on the Gulf of Trieste is now within sight of the Italian forces, which have pushed to within 1,500 yards of the town. The natural defenses are very great. On the west, the Carso tableland projects to the coast, while Mount or something to the north rises several hundred feet, affording the Austrians a clear view of the Italian movements. The Italians yesterday made further advances eastward and southeastward from Gamiano against the Austrian reserve line. On the French western front, the guns were heavily engaged on all sides of the Champagne sector. Lively grenade fighting took place at Teton. In the Champagne region, the French now occupy all the commanding heights with the exception of Hill 200, which is directly north of Montvilliers and which overlooks that village. Although the engagements of the past week look like minor local fights, the aggregate results have placed in possession of the French troops heights that give them a tremendous strategical advantage in this area. All the advantage of ground now rests with the French. The fierce counterattacks by the enemy show how keenly Hindenburg feels the loss of these positions. In the Léon zone, which has been the scene of such continuous and fierce fighting, the French have pushed their line in some places right up to the southern bank of the Alliette River. The heights on the northern bank of the river, which command the southern bank, are a formidable obstacle to the farther advance of the French in this direction. Military experts are agreed that Léon is too strongly defended to be carried from any side save the east. The French advance in the vicinity of Berry-au-Bac, if pushed, would turn the high ground north of the Alliette and open the way for the storming of Léon. 3 miles northwest of Luce, the British captured some prisoners in a raid of east of Vermelles. Northeast of Ypres, 50 of the British raided a British post. One of the British garrison is missing. South of the Scarpe and in the Ypres region, the artillery was active on both sides. 15 enemy airplanes were brought down yesterday. 3 British machines are missing. On the British front, there's been little activity since the fierce fighting that wrested Bullecourt from the enemy. The defection of the Russians on the Eastern Front has brought against the British advance tremendous German forces that make the going extremely slow and arduous for Sir Douglas Haig. A lull has succeeded the big advance, which began with the Battle of Arras. Hindenburg, no longer fearing a Russian offensive, has more men to gamble on counterattacks, but despite the heavy losses which these defensive offensives entail, the German forces in front of the British are sufficiently strong to make Haig's advance more difficult. The Italian offensive, aided by British heavy guns and British monitors, is keeping 1 million Austrians heavily engaged, without hope of reinforcements from Germany and with little prospect of being able to hold Trieste. The Austrian counteroffensive in the Trentino is a more difficult task this year than last. Unable to place sufficient men and guns in that region without risking a catastrophe on the Carso, the Austrians cannot hope to divert the Italians by the threatened counteroffensive in the Trentino. Since last year, the Italians have fortified and rendered almost impregnable the approaches to the Venetian plains. All the passes leading through the mountain barriers that guard northern Italy have been blocked, and nothing but an overwhelming superiority in men and guns, which Austria cannot afford, will avail to carry the Italian defenses on this front. Batteries from the Russian front have been transferred to aid the Austrians in their desperate defense of Trieste. Folkestone was the English town that suffered such damage and loss of life on Friday last when German airplanes bombarded the southeast coast of England. Folkestone is a town of 7,000 inhabitants, about 7 miles from Dover. It is a popular watering place on the Kentish coast. Is that also a place where there's a big race track there or something? Maybe I'm wrong. A Polish army of liberation is being organized, says the Paris Temps. The project is well underway. Poles in France and other allied countries are being mobilized under the Polish flag to fight for the restoration of the ancient kingdom of Poland. I certainly would like to know more about that. In the Romanian war capital of Iași, an important conference is about to take place. I just think it's pretty neat that it's now called the war capital, because it's nowhere near Bucharest, is it? Is about to take place, which may have an important bearing on events on the Russian and Romanian fronts. The French Minister of Munitions, Mr. Thomas, has arrived, and the Russian Minister of War, Mr. Kerensky, is expected in a few days. Romania has been greatly stirred and cheered by the entry of the United States. It looks as if Russia and Romania are waiting the necessary support and guns and material and ready to resume the offensive when these are assured. Russia is in the throes of an active industrial crisis, according to a cable dispatch from Petrograd to London. The country, says the Russian Minister of Finance, is on the verge of economic ruin. The demands of the workers have thrown the economic wheels out of gear. Some of the socialist ministers advocate a separate peace as the only solution of the problem. A commission has been formed to try and solve the economic difficulties precipitated by the revolution. Oh boy, are we in for some interesting fireworks soon, eh? The Brazilian chamber, by 136 votes to 3, has sanctioned the revocation of the declaration of neutrality in this war. The sinking of Brazilian ships and the drowning of Brazilian citizens has brought the nation into line with the United States in the fight against German ruthlessness at sea. The revocation of the declaration of neutrality. Jesus Christ, what a way of saying it. We're not neutral anymore. Anyways, on the Canadian section of the line, says Stuart Lyon, the heavy howitzers are bombarding the enemy's positions to the southwest of Luss. The smashing of the wire defenses by the guns along the whole front presages an early infantry advance. The enemy's trenches are being pounded with high explosives. The lull of the British front continues. Northeast of La Bassée, east of Reichsburg, Lavaux, forget it. The enemy's trenches were raided yesterday morning. In the aerial engagements yesterday, 8 enemy machines were brought down. 5 British machines failed to return. Artillery fighting in the Champagne is the only news of importance from the French headquarters. The bombardment was violent in the Montvilliers sector and particularly on the Casque and Tetten. On the Belgian line, aerial craft on both sides bombarded the enemy works and military establishments. Excuse me. Germany fears a Russian offensive. The renewed activity on the Eastern Front is causing grave concern at Berlin. That Germany is not prepared for a Russian attack is shown by the failure to take advantage of the Russian Revolution. The withdrawal from Russian soil of big reinforcements from Hindenburg's line leaves the enemy unprepared for a vigorous prosecution of the war by Russia and Romania. Mr. Arthur Henderson, the Labour member of the British War Cabinet, has undertaken an important mission to Russia. In his absence, his place in the War Cabinet will be taken by Mr. George Barnes, another Labour leader and Minister of Pensions. In the Caucasus, the Russians repulsed a Turkish attack south of Van. Russian warships on the Black Sea landed a force of Marines on the Anatolian coast and destroyed a Turkish post and a quantity of grain. Wouldn't that be a cool little game? Come on, people. Jeepers jumping. The Russian ambassador to the United States, who had just arrived at Tokyo from Petrograd, is optimistic with regard to the future. He says the Russian army will soon be in a position to launch an offensive. The ambassador, unfortunately, it sounds like the Kerensky one, and that's crunch. The ambassador is the head of a commission of 40 now on its way to Washington. He repudiates the suggestion that Russia will make a separate peace. The Italian advance continues over ground on which lie thousands of Austrian dead. The number of prisoners taken is increasing daily. Vast caverns filled with war supplies are falling into the hands of Cadorna's troops. After the fierce fighting of the past week, there's likely to be a lull in this theater of war. Counterattacks by the enemy have been unsuccessful. The return of vodka, thank God, in Russia is denounced by the Workmen's and Soldiers' Executive as a plot on the part of the monarchists to overthrow the present regime and restore the throne. There is a deplorable increase of drunkenness in the cities and towns, and the demand for the suppression of illicit vodka sales is very strong. Russia's peace terms are complicating the situation for the other allies. I can imagine. The Russian Minister of Agriculture, who is a socialist, says peace must be concluded in which there are no victors and no vanquished. Oh boy, let's think about the Sykes-Picot Agreement that no one really knows about, or I think they don't really know about, and however France and oh my gosh, people want to carve up this, that, and the other thing. He repudiates what they want to do with Constantinople. Oh my gosh, He repudiates the idea of a separate peace and says no Russian blood will be shed to aid Britain and France to repair the historic injustices committed against them. In other words, France will not get no support from Russia in pressing her claim to Alsace-Lorraine. So you can forget what everything else. Holy smokes. A British mercantile converted cruiser has been torpedoed and sunk in the North Sea. Formerly the Booth liner Hillary, of 6,000 tons, the vessel was built 9 years ago. 4 men were killed by the explosion. The hospital ship Dover Castle was sunk in the Mediterranean on Saturday. All on board, including nurses and patients, were safely transferred, with the exception of 6 of the crew who were killed when the torpedo exploded. The campaign in East Africa has been resumed. The rainy season lasted longer than usual, but in the opening days of May, the return of the dry weather witnessed a resumption of activities by the remnant of the German colonial forces. Hemmed in on the southeast, the enemy raided Portuguese territory and advanced towards the border of Nyasaland, burning native villages, seizing food supplies, and terrorizing the inhabitants. The German raiding columns advanced rapidly up the valleys of the Rufiji and Matandu rivers from the southeastern coast, one force breaking northward and the other striking at the Portuguese border. The northern column under Major Wittgens eluded the British forces and reached Katunda on the way to Tabora, but they were pursued by the British, who captured the German commander on May 22nd near Lukalaka, 61 miles southwest of Taborabi. A Belgian force is now cooperating with the British base on the Central Railway. The backbone of the German defense was broken by General Smuts, and the rounding up of the remnant of the natives who were fighting in the German ranks should be completed before many weeks. Yeah, I was pretty surprised to find out, is Smuts back? Aerial activity is increasing along the British front, a sign of an approaching offensive. I do believe Brian R. Smith was mentioning, though, that General Smuts caused ruffled quite a few feathers or something back in London, so maybe they demoted him again. At night, with increasing frequency, the aircraft go out for their errands of destruction, dropping tons of explosives on enemy works and fighting thrilling battles with German machines. Some of these engagements have been fought out at an altitude of more than 3.5 miles. Hundreds of German airplanes were destroyed in May. On Sunday, last 30 of the enemy craft were shot down. The fight on Sunday between 6 British machines and 8 of the enemy was a desperate affair. At one moment, 7 machines were crashing together to the earth. The account of the fight, as cabled by the Associated Press, is one of the most thrilling episodes of the war. I hope we can find that. As well as, on a side note, I think I'm starting to notice, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we're starting to notice Associated Press creeping in to the Globe reports and so on and so forth. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out. Maybe it's because, like I said, they may have been around all the time, just not noticing. Is that the Americans are now in the war and their news sources are no longer considered neutral and therefore are allowed in. I don't know. In Saint-Quentin and Champagne regions, the artillery was very active on both sides. Just a hunch. The enemy directed his fire particularly at the trenches at Mohon and Cassone, but the French guns succeeded in silencing the German batteries. From Gorizia southward to the Gulf of Trieste, the fighting is less intense than in the operations of last week. Between Damiano and the sea, the Italians have taken another slice of the Austrian line west of the Mattiazza village, swinging their, oh wow, the last page, right closer to the defenses of Duino and the railroad to Trieste. British merchant shipping losses continue on the decline. Last week, the losses through mines or submarines were 18 vessels of 1,600 tons and over, 1 vessel of less than 1,600 tons, and 2 fishing vessels. The arrivals numbered 2,719 and the sailings 2,768. The losses of vessels of over 1,600 tons remain the same, but the number of vessels under 1,600 tons sunk shows a decrease of 8. The report that the Admiralty had the submarine mallets well in hand appears to be fully justified by the results. The shortage of shipping has led to the control of all manufactured and unmanufactured tobacco in the United Kingdom and the regulation of sales and prices. No restrictions will be imposed on the supply of tobacco to the troops at the front. In eastern Galicia, there has been a resumption of hostilities, according to an Austrian report, which states that the fighting was livelier. Remember we saw that, I think at one point we were looking up at smoking rates. It's like 96 or 98% or something like that of all British soldiers were smoking. Holy Moses. The economic situation in Russia is very serious, according to the statement put before the Congress of Officer Delegates from the front. Tell you one thing, if I was one of those 2 or 4% soldiers that didn't smoke, I'd probably be bloody rich selling my smokes. I can tell you that much. Wheat and other grain supply, I'd be using that, man. I'd be totally darn right. I'd pretend I'd be smoking my brains out and asking for extra rations so I could trade them. Wheat and other grain supplies are scarce, and the situation is not improved by the refusal of the peasants to part with their supplies except in exchange for farm implements. Interesting. Or cigarettes. I hope. More serious still is the shortage of supplies for the army, which, although somewhat improved, are far from normal. The supply of iron for the munitions factories also shows a considerable falling off. The minister declared that Russia is on the eve of a catastrophe unless the people generally, and the peasants particularly, display a greater spirit of self-sacrifice. Are you kidding me? A greater spirit of self-sacrifice. What else do you want them to do, for Christ's sakes? The fighting spirit of the Russian army is not wholly destroyed. I would want to revolt after reading that. Jesus. The fighting spirit of the Russian army is not wholly destroyed, judging by the resolution passed by the Congress of Officer Delegates from the front. The chief complaint of the army is that there is a shortage of artillery, and the infantry is compelled to charge the enemy and to break down wire defenses without artillery preparation. Oh my God, there's some wicked letters back and forth too from that 1917 book. I should bring it up. oh my gosh, about back and forth. The soldiers like, please, brothers, don't starve us here, and so on and so forth. Like, we're fighting your fight, and oh my God, so cool shit. Anyways, oh my God, it's the last paragraph. Fighting on the Belgian front continues from day to day. So we didn't see the Serbian thing in here. I know it's from an earlier date then. Yesterday, the guns behind the Belgian lines shelled the enemy's machine gun shelters and drew a lively reply from the German artillery. An enemy raiding party made an unsuccessful effort to reach a Belgian post. The guns were active all along the entire front during the day. And that's it. And hopefully that went well. And I hope you have a great remainder of your weekend and a great week coming up. And hopefully see you at 120 in a week. All right. See you later. Bye.